Welcome to the Action Network podcast. I am your host, Evan Abrams, and I am joined, as always, by my compadre, Brandon Anderson. Best Bets Pod, Recap Pod, always here, always around, doing these together. We are going to talk about this entire weekend of divisional round football, go over each game, and then we're going to preview AFC Championship, NFC Championship, talk about the lines, games, kind of break down some of the action. But first of all, Brandon, I would probably call this the best weekend. Like, you always know you're going to get the best games, especially we've talked about the margins sometimes in the wild card round. This one was good. This one was fun. We had some comebacks. We had, some upsets. It was fun.
Yeah, I thought the weekend really delivered. We said this was the best weekend in football. We still got the national championship tomorrow. Make sure you check out the podcast for all the guys giving out picks for that one. College football. But man, all four games I felt like lived up to. I know the Chiefs ended up winning by more than a score, but really drama all the way down to the end. We got drama, high drama on the spread on more than one of these games, coming down to an extra missed point here. Like, just from every standpoint, from a fan standpoint, from a narrative standpoint, from a betting standpoint, like, we checked every box. We didn't get any blowouts, games where I thought one team would control. We had not control there. We had cold weather. We had snow all day on Sunday.
It's a great point.
Feels like playoff football. It felt right. It felt like a really fun weekend of football.
Now, you don't say it often where favorites don't exactly cover every spread in a weekend, and you also get the best quarterbacks and teams that advance so that you can continue to see the best teams play. Because sometimes the issue is you get upsets. It happens in March Madness all the time. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there with two teams you really don't want to see play. That's just not what happened here. So it's great that we had good action, and also some of the good teams we want to see continue to play will be there for the matchups. But let's start at the top here. Baltimore and Buffalo. So Buffalo wins this game 27-25 as a closing 1.5 point underdog at home. Total goes over 51.5. We had talked about it on previous pods, but like the first time since the late 60s that Buffalo closed as a home underdog in the playoffs. And right off the bat, we see this game and Baltimore scores, then Buffalo scores. And we say to ourselves, oh boy, this is going to be absolutely fantastic. We're going to go back and forth. It's going to be drive after drive. We kind of thought what we thought we would get out of Washington and Detroit, we thought we were getting in this game. Then Lamar throws an interception. Buffalo gets no points, but then Lamar has the bad fumble. And honestly, after both of those drives, first time this year, 2 giveaways for Lamar. First time since the AFC title game against the Chiefs. And at this point, you say to yourselves, well, I'm not necessarily positive that Baltimore can overcome this. I mean, at this point in the game, when you've seen the 2 turnovers, what's your thought here?
I mean, I got to be honest, at this point, like, let's be real. We all know how I feel about Lamar Jackson. I've been betting on Baltimore, had the futures on Baltimore, but we all know how I feel about Lamar and the MVPs and all the Lamar discourse. I'm like, oh, here we are again. I had Baltimore. I had them in this game. I had the futures. I finally believed in them. And it felt like Lamar was doing the Lamar thing again. You had to feel that way in halftime with the interception that was frankly terrible. Overthrown by like 10 yards, just like a punt return catch for the defender. And then the fumble, which was even worse, which is fully Lamar's fault.
The fumble was terrible.
Trying to do too much. I thought easily the biggest play of the game. We'll come back to that. At that point of the game, I'm not feeling great. I'm not really feeling like Baltimore has a lot of shot, because we talked about this on the pick before the game. I was on Baltimore, but I wanted Baltimore because I liked them early in the game, and I liked them big in protecting a lead, not playing from behind, because that meant having to trust Lamar, and especially trusting the passing offense in the weather with no Zay Flowers. And let me be honest here, to go into the second half, credit where it's due, I thought Lamar was brilliant for the second half. I thought that he was really, really good. The Ravens in the second half, here are their drives. 9 plays, 35 yards for a field goal, 7 for 80 and a touchdown, 6 for 26, and then that's where we got the Mark Andrews fumble. Otherwise, they were driving and probably going to get some points again. And then, look, the Ravens get the ball back, down 8, on the 12 after holding penalty. You got to go get the touchdown. Lamar did the thing. 8 plays, 88 yards, down the field, all Lamar, making the plays, keeping plays alive, gets him into the end zone, hits Mark Andrews in the chest, in the hands, that he catches 99 times out of 100. this is the 1 out of 100, the season's over. So where do we go with that? Because in the second half, Lamar was great. The Ravens offense that ranked number 1 all season looked the part in the second half. They just made 3 big mistakes in this game. Well, maybe not 3. In this game, they had 3 turnovers and they whiffed on 2 2-point conversions. I didn't like the first 2-point conversion. It was the right decision to do it, but I didn't like the play. Just like a standard drop back for Lamar, like get him moving, do the thing you did in the second one, which was a great play and worked perfectly. You just got to execute. So it kind of comes down to, it didn't really feel this way in real time, but for me looking back, it felt like a tale of 2 halves. And it felt like on the whole, Baltimore was the better team. Pretty clearly by the stats, they were the better team. But you got to win the game, and Buffalo won the game.
I think my issue, so last year when they played the Chiefs and we all yelled at each other and said they needed to run it more. I think the criticism this year kind of turns to not exactly you should have run the ball more, which we can talk about in a second, more just the play calls at certain times. So like I think the biggest drive was down 14-7. They've got 1st and goal from the 2. They go Henry rush, then Lamar gets sacked, Lamar incompletion, field goal. Like at that point, 1st and goal from the 2. No matter what happens, it should be 3 Derrick Henry runs. If it doesn't work, great. That's it. Like you've done what you're supposed to do. To me, then it becomes 14-10. Then Buffalo runs down the field. Now it's 21-10. Now you go into the half down double digits. Josh is at this point thrown for 69 yards. Like he's done nothing. You're down double digits because of turnovers. Buffalo's 3 of 3 in the red zone. So I think certain play calls like that, and you mentioned the other one, like to me, I believe Derrick Henry had 16 carries in this game. I think you ran the ball 30 times. So I can't exactly yell at, and you had 105 yards after contact. I'm not going to yell at you for not running it this year. I mean, maybe Derrick Henry could have gotten more love, but he had 7 second half carries. And that final drive where he got no carries, you still scored a touchdown. So I think this game from a Baltimore point of view, a little bit difficult to like put the blame in different places, aside from the fact you missed a bunch of 2-point conversions. You lost the turnover battle 3-0. And very, very clearly, where is this? Teams to win the turnover battle 3 or more, 40-3. I think it's 41-3 straight up playoffs last 20 years. So it's just, you're just not going to win those games. I think it's a very, very difficult situation when you talk about, okay, where do we go from here in Baltimore? Because I do kind of think they changed the script up a little bit and a lot went right. But, you missed a few plays, which happens.
Yeah, it really is almost the perfect outcome for the discourse, right? Because it's kind of a paint by numbers. You can say whatever you thought before the game about Lamar Jackson, about the Ravens, you probably can reinforce that what you think after the game, which is great for the discourse and terrible for the discourse, depending on how you feel about it. The biggest share of the blame pie has to be Mark Andrews. I'm sorry,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
the fumble, punch out, and the drop 2-point conversion, like it's got to be him. It's funny. I'm watching the game with my dad, and 2 plays before that, Mark Andrews got a 4th down and 1 QB sneak, and they picked up the 1st down on it. And I comment to my dad watching, "What are you doing? It's 4th down. It's the 4th quarter. The season's on the line. You have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, and you're putting your tight end under center." And my dad goes, "Well, I trust him. He's got good hands. I always trust Mark Andrews, whatever he's doing." And then 2 plays later, he gets the fumble and then come at the end of the game. Like, look, you have to trust Mark Andrews. He's going to make those plays most of the time. He just didn't today. That has to be the blame, even if it's just kind of fluky, snowy. You drop the ball sometimes, but that's that.
I just think it goes back to the play calling. And you just said it again. I think there were some odd play calls in this one. I'll give you a stat, which I tweeted out. Ravens have now lost 26 consecutive games straight up when trailing by 10 plus points at the half. Last win came back in 2012. Feels almost impossible. And now Lamar 0-4 in the playoffs when trailing at the half. So, I mean, there's been no comebacks. I believe he's 3-5 in the playoffs now. Tough, road ahead. Now, we're not talking a lot about Buffalo, but we're going to talk about Buffalo in a little bit because they're facing Kansas City, and we're going to go over that game. But I mean, the only other thing I could say here, Lamar, 12 of 14 in a clean pocket in this game, 2 touchdowns. 13 of 14 with no blitz, 2 touchdowns. When he was blitzed, 5 of 11 with an interception. I just think clean pocket, he was looking great. And other times he fumbled, he was a mess, and the turnovers did them in. Anything else before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, like, Nosy Flowers in this game, for Lamar to not have his top receiver, lost Rashad Bateman for a bit also, and to
Yeah.
lead them down the field with not great weapons and missing your top guy, like, that's the drive you dream of. That's the thing we ask every one of these quarterbacks to do, and put the ball on the money in the 2-point conversion. Like, you cannot ask any more of Lamar. That's me saying that, the Lamar critic. That said, the whole game counts. And I tweeted this out. The biggest play of the game was not the drop 2-point conversion. Now it feels like it because it happened at the end. The biggest play by far was the Lamar Jackson fumble in the first half. First half counts. All the points count. The Ravens are at the 34 of Buffalo. That fumble, giving the ball up and giving it up in the backfield where it gets returned nearly for a touchdown. Thankfully, they only get a field goal out of it. Or no, I think they get a touchdown. But that play was worth -8 EPA for the Ravens. That was more than double the EPA value of any other play in the game. That one play dropped the Ravens from 65% win probability to 43%. No matter what else you do, I thought Lamar outplayed Josh Allen for the entire majority of the game outside of 2 or 3 big mistakes. The 2 or 3 big mistakes matter, and those make up for all the other plays. And look, what's weird here from the narrative standpoint is we have said for years, Lamar Jackson doesn't show up in the playoffs. You got to show up and you got to back up the narrative and you got to win games. Lamar Jackson showed up today. I think now Lamar Jackson just became Josh Allen. Josh Allen has showed up in the playoffs before, but then loses because sometimes you get outplayed in a coin flip game or the coin flip doesn't land your way. I think Baltimore is the better team today. The stats were better for Baltimore. They ran the ball better. Lamar Jackson's stats were better than Josh Allen. I didn't think Josh Allen was all that great. He just didn't make the big mistakes. He's made all the big mistakes for years. That's been Josh Allen's thing. He's cut the mistakes. Today, Lamar made the mistakes, and I feel like at the end of the day, I know there's some luck involved. Andrew's going to make those plays usually, but you got to create your own luck. You got to make the winning play. Josh Allen has been good enough to win in the past, but we criticize him because he hasn't actually won. Now he won one of them. He's got to do 2 more. He's not out of the woods yet. But I think Lamar Jackson has elevated from hasn't done it into the playoffs to, okay, he did it. He did all the things we wanted him to, except you still have to win the game at the end, and he's still going to get the criticism. Because if you want to be the possible 3-time MVP and the best in the world, you have to win the games at the end. You're the quarterback. That's how this narrative thing goes. So I think it's interesting. I'm giving Lamar credit. He was really, really good in this game, but he also made big, big mistakes, and you can't do that in a game like this.
Yeah, he was Superman. I mean, he kind of did it all and also gave it all away. Josh Allen made sure he didn't turn over the ball at all in this game. 6 incompletions, never really felt like he was putting the ball in danger. His 10 carries, he had 2 touchdowns. Like, he was legitimately doing everything he had to do to set up this game and not be the one that throws it away. And that's kind of the way it felt like. All right, let's keep going here. Rams, Eagles. So Eagles win this game 28-22. They close as 7-point favorites, which you're going to hear a theme throughout this one, which is the favorite not exactly covering the closing spread. Total goes over 43.5. So the thing I noted here, which we had talked about in previous podcasts, and I think was a topic amongst a bunch of people, was kind of the missed tackles on the Rams side. And you literally see it on the first drive with Hurts, who kind of runs through two people, potentially 2 Rams on that drive. Now you get the missed extra point. Now Jake Elliott basically throws the entire cover and game away from start to finish in terms of the kicks he misses. But he starts it right away when the Eagles are up 6-0. But to me, it's just the same story over and over again with Jalen Hurts. 39 passing yards in the last week in the first half. This week he had 66, 25 net passing yards. I mean, Philly just wasn't moving the ball at all in that direction. I mean, every time I felt like they tried to get it to A.J. Brown, something went wrong. I think he had 1 reception for 4 targets in the first half. So, I mean, there was no chemistry whatsoever. And then last week we had talked about Hurts had 5.3 yards per pass against Green Bay, and we were like, well, if this isn't going to do it if you're going to face Detroit, well, you win the game this week, and he has 2.4 yards per pass. So it got a bunch worse, and then they still won the game somehow. And the way they won the game was Philly on the ground was ridiculous. 10.1 yards per rush in the first half, 171 yards. Both Hurts and Barkley had over 100 yards on 2 rushes in the first half. I mean, they were just all over the place. Barkley, 26 rushes, 205, and 2 touchdowns. He's only the 5th guy to ever do those numbers in a playoff game. So, I mean, we can talk all we want about Philly and Washington next week, but to me, the story in this game, and we can talk about the Rams and nice job covering and doing a few things well in the cold here, but I think it's probably better to spend our time talking about what to do with Philly, because they continue to show us the team they are, which is we can't throw through the air. There's problems between the receivers and Hurts, because obviously he can find Goddard, but Saquon is kind of impossible to deal with at this point.
Yeah, the Eagles are really tough to figure out right now. A.J. Brown finishes 2 catches for 14 yards on 7 targets. In 2 playoff games, A.J. Brown, the number 1 man against man receiver by PFF grade, A.J. Brown has 3 catches for 17 yards in 2 playoff games.
Wow.
Like, that is a failure. I don't even care that you have to win the games, obviously, but you got to find a way to get A.J. Brown the ball. Jalen Hurts, not good enough. Negative EPA as a passer on 32 plays. He took 7 sacks. That was a big part of it. The thing is, too, with the Eagles, if you look at just the raw stats, it's like, okay, the Eagles won with defense and running the football. And that's okay. That's who the Eagles are. That's what they did. If you dig into it a little bit more, okay, Kyren Williams for the Rams ends up with negative EPA running. But Kyren Williams had a huge fumble, and that was a 20% win percentage swing against the Rams when he loses the ball. Saquon Barkley finishes with 205 yards and 2 scores, but 2 of those plays are the huge monster touchdown runs, which of course count. That's really good. I'm not discounting those. But outside of those 2 plays, he ran 24 times for 65 yards, 2.7 yards a carry. The Eagles actually couldn't move the ball in this game. They just had 3 long runs. They had the Hurts run and they had the 2 Saquon runs. And again, those count. That's going to get the ball and get the job done if you're going to keep doing those. But by game and even play by play success rate wise, the Rams were really the better team down by down in this game. To me, I came away thinking first, okay, the Eagles won with running and defense. I actually think the Eagles won because if you look at the 4 biggest plays of the game, for the Eagles, their biggest plays were the 2 Saquon runs, long touchdowns, great way to have a big play. For the Rams, their 2 biggest plays by EPA and win percentage were fumbles. Stafford had the fumble, Kyren had the fumble. And if your 2 biggest plays are touchdowns on long plays versus fumbles on the other side, you're going to lose the game after that. The Rams finished with more yards in the game. They were 2 of 5 in the red zone. You can't do that against a defense this good, but 5 trips to the red zone in Philadelphia, that's a good game, especially playing on an ice rink effectively. By the way, very weird that if you think back to where did the entire season start? All the way back on that opening Thursday, Friday night. Remember, we get Thursday night, then we go to Brazil. What do? We go Ravens start and end the season by having a tight end almost send the game to overtime, but he stepped out of bounds and we blow it. We don't go overtime. Today, Ravens, tight end, almost catches the 2 that would set up overtime. By the way, not necessarily. Josh Allen had like 90 seconds to go score a field goal for the win or win in overtime. That was not going to win the game for Baltimore. That part matters. But very mirrored image. Same thing with Kansas City. And then we had the Brazil game, Philly, Green Bay. Here we go. Philadelphia playing basically on ice again. They couldn't have any footing in that Brazil game. And we get this weird thing. We get a star quarterback injured. Jordan Love in that one. Jalen Hurts gets injured in this one. This really weird symmetry, except in this case, well, I guess the Eagles won both of those games also. They won the first one. They win this one as well. So this very, very strange. Jalen Hurts took that very strange sack at one point. I saw that was the first sack with a first safety with a split sack since 1980 in the playoffs. You're not supposed to just like drop back when you can't move and get sacked by multiple guys. I thought both play callers did not cover themselves in glory on this one. Now I'm a little biased here. If you're watching on video, you see I'm still with you from the dungeons in North Dakota. I've played a little snow football in my life. I understand about what it is to like run on some snow and ice. I was just screaming at the TV, Matthew Stafford, drop 3 steps or 5 steps, plant your foot, get the ball out. You have Puka, you have Cooper Kupp running short routes. Just get it to them short and let them do their thing. Corners cannot stay with receivers, and the defense could not get any pressure on unless they had time. But if you could just take it, drop back, get the ball out. They did that on the one drive. Stafford led them right down for a touchdown. It gets down to 6. They get the ball back. I'm thinking, man, I think Philly's in trouble because they finally figured this out. They can't stop the short pass. And I thought the Rams panicked a little bit and started throwing it further down the field. Well, that part wasn't working. Now you're counting on timing. Now you got the wind involved, everything like that. But I don't know what Philly was doing, continuing to try to have Jalen Hurts drop back when the guy can't move and isn't a great passer anyways. Stafford is trying to hold the ball too long. This very weird game that I think both teams will have a lot of regrets about this one, but Philly less regrets. They win the game.
Yeah, you had two. I don't want to. They're not underdogs because Baltimore closed as a favorite, but between Baltimore and the Rams, like last minute, down a few points, able to get back in the game, they both kind of fell short. And after you said to yourselves like, oh, well, those teams were kind of playing better, and they lost the game. It almost feels like both teams that won those games didn't exactly have like better games in certain ways. And it's weird to say about Buffalo because I think you're going to look at the box score and even some team stats and say to yourself, well, Buffalo played pretty good, but Baltimore, aside from the turnovers, I mean, they're definitely stayed in the game. So the one thing and we could talk about this again at the end, but I think the red zone stuff from Philly is very worrisome heading into Washington. I believe 1 of 6 between Green Bay and the Rams in the red zone. And against Washington this year, 3 of 7. So not too much better there. And Philly's gotten really lucky in the turnover game. I believe they've gotten 6 turnovers from opponents in their 2 games, which Washington is barely punting, forget turning over the ball. So again, a lot to talk about. I don't think we need to stay too much here. We might as well kind of keep going and we can circle back. But do you have anything more on this game?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing, depending on when you bet this one, we got to comment just on the Eagles missed the extra point. So Saquon gets the long touchdown to go up, should have been 14 to put the game away. They missed the extra point, should be irrelevant. I had Philly -6, so I ended up pushing here. It was 6.5. Most we closed at 7. So that 1 point ended up making it 6 instead of 7, or maybe the Rams go for 2. Or I don't really know what happens, butterfly effect, but that was not the only time this weekend that we got a missed extra point, screwing with the closing line there. Otherwise, obviously, Jalen Hurts' injury has to be the big story coming out of this one. Like, to me, what you just said about Philly's red zone, that's Jalen Hurts. Like, they couldn't even do the tush push. They got down to the 1 yard line, and they tried to do pistol stuff because that's all that Hurts could do the second half. Tried to have Saquon get in, and eventually, finally, on 4th down, they're like, all right, Jalen, can you give us one tush push? And then they couldn't do it because they get a false start and had to get the field goal, and almost cost them the season by not being able to do that. So we'll talk about Philadelphia, Washington, obviously, but I don't know what Jalen Hurts can give you, especially because you've heard I'm not really particularly high on what Hurts has been giving already. The one thing he can give is with his legs. So if he's not moving that well now either, and he's not getting the ball to A.J. Brown, I don't know what else is left. Like, I was kind of to the point where I was like, you know what? Wildcat Saquon for the rest of the 4th quarter and just run the ball on the ice and let them do the thing. That's what you're doing anyways in the pistol. Just get Jalen Hurts out of here and put another blocker on there. So I don't know, what does that look like in a week? I don't know how healthy you can get by then.
I mean, Hurts was looking good on the ground. I felt like a bunch of times when he scrambled, he looked much more comfortable than when he was passing the ball, which it was odd for me to keep saying that because he saw a lot of open space, I felt like, in this game. And again, I'm having a tough balance on the Saquon thing between he keeps having a lot of really long runs, explosive runs, yards after contact runs, but yet the other 20 carries, 18 carries are created only into 70 yards. I mean, how do I not talk about the explosive runs? So as long as Philly keeps delivering him the ball, I kind of assume there's going to be a median there. and he's going to fall in that 100+ zone. And Washington is certainly vulnerable. I mean, we just saw Gibbs literally run dances up and down the field. Okay, let me go into my big stat, and then we'll recap Saturday. The big stat, and I'm going to give you two because it's divisional weekend and we're having some fun. Favorites go 0-4 ATS on the closing line in the divisional round. So KC closed at 9.5. And just so I can get this right, Detroit closed at 8. Obviously, Washington won. Philly closes at 7. Rams lose by 6. And then Baltimore closes at -1.5 in Buffalo. This would be just the third time that's happened since the 1970 merger, and the first time all four favorites fail to close on the closing line divisional round, 2007. And then the last one before we move on here. So preseason odds for the four teams left in the field: KC at 5-1, Philly at 12-1. Buffalo was actually 16-1. Then the fun one, the Commanders were 150-1. They would be the fourth team since the 1978, 151 higher. The 1979 Bucks, 1999 Rams, 2021 Bengals. So I'll have more in the article. You'll hear about it all week. But those are the comps right now for Jaden Daniels. And I guess 99 Rams is kind of a rookie with Kurt Warner, but fun stuff there. So let's just recap Saturday, and I'll let you kind of start here since I've been rambling for a minute here. But Washington, Detroit. Washington wins this game 45-31 as 8-point dogs on the close. I know it was like 9.5 all week, but total goes over 55.5. An indoor craziness that went on in this one, but 52 total points in the first half. What did you take out of the beginning of this game?
Yeah, I mean, this game had everything. This game was so much fun. Everything we thought this was going to be, I thought this played exactly according to script. Neither defense really could do anything in this game unless they just made a big play. First half, 52 points, tied a playoff record. 42 of those were in the second quarter. I didn't check, but that's got to be a playoff record. We were getting live total in the high 80s as we approached halftime. Like, we're talking like Big 12 after dark sort of scores here in the NFL, in the playoffs. We get David Montgomery on a double shovel pass, throwing a pass, but we were ready to like put Ben Johnson into the presidency after that. Then later in the game, we get Jameson Williams, fresh off a 61-yard reverse touchdown run. Another reverse, throws an interception, like right as Detroit is driving, giving the game away. We get Teddy Bridgewater in the game. Teddy Bridgewater is literally coaching high school football a month ago, and he comes in the game and is playing actual minutes and leads a touchdown drive. Granted, he just handed the ball off, but he got the job done. We got 4 Lions attempting a pass in this game. Ben Johnson maybe trying a little too hard at times, if we're being honest. Cliff Kingsbury actually maybe out coaching Ben Johnson, if we're being honest, because I've had plenty of times hard on Cliff Kingsbury. At the end of the day, after all the fun, we knew the Lions defense had been in shambles since midseason. They just had too many injuries. And then the game started, and like first drive, Amik Robertson goes out injured. The cornerback that everyone loved for shutting down Justin Jefferson, he's out. Brian Branch leaves later. The star safety that had been possible DPOY candidate, he's out. Like, there's nobody left. You're down 6-7 starters from opening day. You're down just as many guys in the second string. There's just no shot. The Lions end up playing like underdogs. Like, they're running trick plays and reverses and going forward and forward. And I know the Lions always do that stuff. The Lions played like, we've got to come up with something to catch up, because they were behind, and I think they were right to play that way. I thought that they recognized appropriately, Dan Campbell, credit where it's due, recognized we're going to lose. We got to come up with something because our defense cannot get off the field. And like, quite frankly, Washington's defense couldn't get off the field either. Detroit's offense was even better than Washington was. They just happened to turn it over 5 times, which matters. Washington made the play when they needed to, and Jared Goff lost the game and the season for Detroit. But man, just fireworks all over the place. Jahmyr Gibbs just running crazy. Jaden Daniels is that dude. I think at the end of the day, that's what it is. Like, you have Jared Goff, not that dude, and you have Jaden Daniels is that dude. And just, man, if what'd you say, Washington 150? If you have a 150 Washington ticket, hit us in the comments on Twitter. Like, when we post this like, I want to see the ticket I want to see the 150 because I don't know what price you'd have had to give me to bet on Washington before the season, but I did not put them in the NFC Championship. This is awesome.
Yeah, rookie quarterback. Basically, I mean, I think he's the sixth rookie to make a conference championship game. That is Jaden Daniels. No rookie has ever started the Super Bowl. Obviously, Brock Purdy most recently. He was 4 for 4 in that game for like 23 yards before all havoc went loose and he missed the rest of the game. So he at least started okay in that one. I think from my point of view, I want to go back to the quarterback rankings we did on the best bets episode because I do feel like we were kind of right. Like our last two were Goff and Hurts.
Yeah.
And I understand Hurts got the win, but I don't think anything he did really changed my opinion. And then having Stafford, Allen, Jaden, like I don't necessarily think Stroud did too much wrong, but I think that was necessarily probably the right angle from you and me. So I feel kind of proud about that.
Yeah, I agree.
The only thing I think was really interesting before we get into other stuff about next week, Dan Campbell said it at the half, and I think after Jared Goff threw the pick six and made it 24-14, Detroit felt like they were one possession back for like 2.5 quarters. And they never had to stop in them to get them back in the game because even when they got close, it just all of a sudden Washington would have like an 11-play drive for 91 yards. And then bang, Washington has a 15 plays over 8 minutes, including 2 fourth downs. Like there was never a moment where Detroit felt like, oh, they got the stop to get them back in the game. And I think you felt it. In the playoffs, Washington, I believe, is 6 of 9 on fourth down, which if you've been watching their games, it completely feels like that. Because even when they're getting into that position where it's 4th and 1, 4th and 2, their play calling is very efficient, and you got to give some good stuff to Kingsbury in that situation because it has worked well. I do want to talk about.
I want to comment on the fourth down thing. I had a note about the fourth down. So Washington first drive, 8 plays, 51 yards. Then they go fourth down, 4th and 1, I think, like near scoring position. Great. Love the call. You're Washington. You're going for it. You're the underdog on the road. They go for what I think they bring Mariota on. And I think they had a Mariota fake sneak called. I think he was going to pitch the ball to Jane Daniels, who was gone. Like, that's a touchdown if you get the pitch off. And I think Brian Robinson panicked a little bit, runs into him. You get this totally botched, terrible-looking play, and you blow a fourth down. Detroit immediately goes down the other end and gets a touchdown. I think a lot of teams, as the underdog, the 6th seed, you're cooked at that point. Like, you crumble, that's the end. You go turtle, no more fourth downs. We gave it our one shot. That is not what Washington did. From there, into halftime, they go field goal, touchdown, 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 touchdown every time they touch the ball. Detroit only stopped them one more time the rest of the game. Washington went for fourth down 3 more times after that. They converted all 3, and they scored a touchdown on all 3 drives. So much for taking the points because 3 and 3 was not going to beat Detroit. Detroit put up points in this game. They scored plenty here. And the biggest fourth down was one Washington didn't even have to convert. It was 4th and 2 late in the game. They're up 10 on the 13, like 7.5 minutes left. Detroit lines up, and Washington doesn't have to snap the ball because Detroit's got too many men on the field. Tom Brady calls it out as we're watching it happen, and Washington gets the auto convert on a fourth down. That's not even in the stats there because, look, Detroit, they got like dudes coming off the street playing. Like, they don't know who's supposed to be on the field. We got backups playing that didn't play any regular season snaps at all. Like, that's what happens when you're out of guys there. But Washington, they're in no huddle for like the entire game here, just causing confusion. No huddle puts stress on the defense. Fourth downs put stress on the defense. Detroit's defense was stressed for the last 2 months of the season, and Washington was like, we don't think you can handle it for 60 minutes. We're just coming at you. And Washington basically came into this game and was like, hey, you want to play no defense and all offense, Ben Johnson in Detroit? Great, let's do it. Let's go. Shootout right now. We think we can beat you at your own game. And then they did. And frankly, credit where it's not due for me, I picked Washington to win and then barely profited off of it at all because I thought Washington, if they win, would win by 1-6. I wasn't high enough on my own pick. Washington won comfortably. I'm like rooting for the backdoor Detroit anti-cover to get me back down to my 1-6 margin. Washington was too good, and they just beat Detroit at their own game. Detroit, 521 yards. They were 9 yards of play till late. Came down to 7.7, still very good. But Goff had pick six. He had a strip sack. He had interception. Those 3 plays cost the Lions 35% win probability and 16 EPA. And now, big picture, Detroit now has won 2 playoff games in 34 years. That sucks. And that is how it is. Those 2 were last year, by the way. This is a devastating outcome for Detroit. You lose the game, you lose the dream season. Now, because you lost early, I think you very, very likely lose both coordinators. Ben Johnson, we assume, is gone. Losing early, so these coaches are available to go do all the interviews they want now. I think Aaron Glenn maybe is gone too. Is that the end of the era for this version of Detroit? Jared Goff is what he is because of Ben Johnson, because of what they've been there. That aggressive Dan Campbell personality, does that work when you don't have these play calls backing you up? I don't know. On the other side, Washington, their first NFC Championship since 1991. I'm sure you've seen the stat. Everyone's talking about it because we love to dump on the Cowboys. The Cowboys now have the longest drought of not making the NFC Championship. The Bears are second longest. They're 2010. The Cowboys are 1995. America's team, 15 more years since getting there. I know we talked about them as the top job available for coaches, but in your own division, Washington finally getting there. Detroit finally got there last year. I don't know where this is for Washington. Like, it's interesting thinking about this big picture. Is this sort of the early peak moment for them? And, I'm thinking of like in the NBA, you get kind of this magical spot where sometimes the right injuries and the right path lines up, and suddenly the Atlanta Hawks are in the conference championship, or the Portland Trailblazers. Everyone's like, okay, that's the up and coming team now. And then it's like, no, you were still the 6th seed. You just kind of won the game a couple times, and then you went back to being the thing you were before. So is this that, or is this Jaden Daniels being like, no, I'm Lamar Jackson too. I'm top 5 quarterback. I'm going to do this thing. And I think if you're Philadelphia, looking at the matchup now next week, you got a division rival who just beat you a month and a half ago. You have clearly the worst quarterback, the way that Hurts is injured and Jane Daniels is playing right now. And you have a volatile opponent who's going to go for it on 4th down, who's going to no huddle, who's going to put pressure on you all game. I think Philadelphia is clearly the better team, but you don't want volatility. You just want to be better. And I think Philadelphia should feel like they should win, but the pressure is all on them, and Washington is fully house money at this point. And I would still only put them maybe 5-10% to win the Super Bowl. They're clearly by far the worst team left. It's all Jaden Daniels, so I can't bet it, but I also can't rule them out. Jaden Daniels makes them live, and their 4th downs and their volatility makes them a live underdog. And I don't think any of the 3 teams left besides them are that invulnerable that they couldn't beat them any given Sunday.
It's crazy to say because I know Washington obviously plays outside, but I feel like I preferred them in the dome environment, which I think helped their craziness on 4th down. Where in Philly, outdoors, I just looked at the weather. It's going to be, who the hell knows? It's a week away, but it's, in the 30s. It's not going to be as perfect as it was. So I think there's something interesting there. I'm sure if I looked back at all their games and I looked outdoor, I'm sure their 4th downs were just fine. And it's just, something else to deal with. But I do think that part of the reason why I liked Washington previously entering this week a little bit more was because it was a controlled environment where Detroit had to play their perfect way, which they kind of did, aside from Goff throwing it away a million times. Like, the numbers still look really good. Gibbs was great. Like, Detroit did a lot good. Like, Amon-Ra's numbers were crazy. But the turnovers kind of did them in. I think Washington has to play even more perfect next week, while Philly feels like they never play well anyway and win games. So it's a little bit strange. The one thing I do want to say, and this was just funny, I was going to ask you a trivia question, but it's too easy. So Detroit was the only teaser leg that didn't hit this weekend of all the games. So obviously -8 losing outright will do it for you. And I felt like this was significant. So I looked this up. Since 2000, we've had, 9 teams score 500 plus points and win by 200 plus points in the regular season. None of them won the Super Bowl. Last team to do that were the 99 Rams. So I just feel like we see all these dominant teams entering the regular season. And some of those teams, like it was the 2024 Lions, so obviously this year's Lions, 2019 Ravens, 2013 Broncos got there, 2012 Patriots, 2011 Packers and Saints, 2007 Patriots, obviously. Just so many different teams that just dominated the competition didn't end up getting through. But all right, let's keep rolling here. Oh, sorry, go.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this on the Picks podcast last week for Best Bets. This is that thing about betting against the one seeds in this round. And I think to me, here's what it comes down to. We think of the one seed as a body of work. We think of a 17-game season, 18 games, whatever you want to call it. We look back and we see the whole thing. We should. You earn the one seed, you earn the bye, and we look back and think, okay, wow, look what the Lions did all season. But it doesn't really matter. It matters that they're in the home game and they're in the bye, but actually, we should be looking at what are they right now? What's the team right now? Because what Washington did the first game of the season when Jane Daniels is a rookie on the road in his debut, when Dan Quinn hasn't had time to coach up the defense yet, when the offensive line has 5 brand new starters, who cares? Like, that has no bearing whatsoever on what Washington is right now today, including what they are today is different next week. Sam Cosmi, the right guard, is out now for the season. Yeah. So they're, again, a little different than what, like, you've got to always be changing, updating what you think a team is. And I think the problem why one seeds have such a terrible ATS in the divisional round, like year after year, we see the favorites go 0-4 ATS with some shenanigans a little bit on the closing lines on some of these. But that was the big trend coming in, is to be careful betting favorites in this round, because look, Kansas City, they win the game. They end up not covering. We'll get to them in a second, but they're 11-0 in one-score games. At the end of the season, now you're 15-2. Now we have to treat you like the one seed juggernaut that your final body of work tells you that you are. But the reality is that's all gone now. And all those one-score games, the 11-0 part didn't matter as much as the fact that they're all one-score games and that you let teams hang around, and that part is telling going forward as well. And so I think it's a difference of respect the body of work and what the team was, but also what are they right now? And in this case, Detroit had been telling us for quite a while now that they were not what Detroit was from the body of work on the season, that the defense was not holding up anymore. And then I think that is the version that played out. And I think that line badly miscalculated what Detroit used to be and made it be compared to what they actually are now. And that's why the line, they're 9.5 point favorites and lose by 2 touchdowns. Like, you don't cover, you can have like a 20-point teaser. You still didn't cover your teaser in that one. That's just not a pick that's going to hit. So, and then of course, Chiefs Texans, which we can get into now, goes crazy in the final few seconds, depending on where you got that number.
Yeah, so let's just start there. So Houston, Kansas City. Kansas City wins the game 23-14. Doesn't cover as a 9.5 point favorite on the close. Total goes under 41.5. I mean, that's where you have to start, because KC closes minus 9.5. It was actually minus 8.5 on game day, and ends up kind of getting pushed up a full point in like the final hour or so. Yeah. So, I mean, listen, if you ended up betting KC minus 9.5, there's really not much to say to you. I mean, you had all week to do it, and you were really busy at the office. You finally looked at it 20 minutes before kick, and you were like, 9.5, this stinks. And if you did that, I'm really sorry, because the way this game ended, it's only a moment if you've been gambling forever where you say to yourself, well, this is something that I've seen and I hope doesn't happen. And if you have Houston, you're like, oh my God, this is a possibility. So I don't know if you want to comment any further there, but it's one of those, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, just moments where everybody rushes to see everyone else's comment because you just can't believe what you just seen. And especially in a Kansas City game where, for what feels like the 44th time in this season, they're going to win a game and not cover. It's just absolutely treacherously perfect. But what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously keyed in on this one because I gave out the Texans, but I gave out Texans when we recorded our show at plus 8.5. Now, I knew that I thought the line would rise because I said all week I thought the line would get to 9.5 for teaser protection. I think that's kind of where we ended up going there at the end of the week. We got those teaser picks in to start the week off. I had to give out 8.5. That's when the pick is. That's the pick I made. I can't take credit for a different pick that existed later in life. So I'm watching, thinking, okay, the Texans are down 11, but D'Amico's real conservative. They absolutely should not kick a field goal here. They absolutely need to get a touchdown. Field goal means I still need an onside and a touchdown and a 2-point conversion just to tie the game, just to be huge underdogs against Patrick Mahomes on the road. Like, that is no way to win a game. You should go for the touchdown. But of course, they settle for the field goal, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I'm going to backdoor this cover, which, by the way, Houston should have covered all the way. Houston, clearly the right side from a betting standpoint, regardless of the number. They're down 11. The field goal gets blocked, because of course it does. It's the Chiefs. They always find a way to block the field goal. So now it's still 11. That's that. Only now, Kansas City punter runs out the back of the end zone for a safety with, 15 seconds left. And there's the 2 points. So now it's just like, okay, at the close, 9.5. That flips one way. If you bet it the rest of the week, 8.5. Now you're feeling the pain. Like, I can't really feel aggrieved that I lose by half a point. They don't take the 2-point safety if they're not ahead by that score, which they only had by that score, because I thought the Texans were really good to get to the rest of the game, except horrifying on special teams, which unfortunately is a kind of remix of an old matchup they had in the playoffs against the Chiefs. So they miss a 55-yard field goal, defensible. Tough kick, bad weather, I get it. Then you miss an extra point. Then you get the blocked field goal late. That's 7 points from your kicker. And on the very first play of the game, they allow a huge kickoff return to the Chiefs. It looked like it was going to be a touchdown. I'm like, oh, this game is over immediately. First play, they hold them to 3. That was a recurring theme. I thought Houston's defense was incredible. I thought their defense really stood up. Will Anderson was fantastic, especially early. They held the Chiefs to 212 yards in this game. Part of that is field position and what they needed to do. But you hold the Chiefs to 212 yards in a playoff game, you've done your job. You definitely have to feel good about that one. But the special teams gave away 10 points. 3 off the kickoff at the beginning, 7 off of missed kicks. You lost by 9. You gave away 10 points. I can help you with the math on that. I'd like the 10 points. I'd like to win by 1, please, sir. So I thought Houston was the better team. They're the first team ever to lead by 100 yards or more with 0 turnovers and still lose a playoff game. Teams had been 49-0 before that from ESPN. So that's one of the big stories in this game. I know it's a while ago now, but the other big story, at least as it's unfolding online, has to be the officiating. That was the big thing we all talked about as the game is unfolding, with the big calls consistently going in Patrick Mahomes' favor and the Chiefs. The thing that we know is a story all season. What'd you think of the officiating in this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's never going to be great when it feels like everyone who's talking about the game sees something so clearly on one side and the officials see it another way, and the game is in Kansas City. So I just feel like there's a lot of, if the game had been in Houston, like, do we feel like anything gets dealt with any differently? Like, the officiating wasn't great. I think there was a few different calls that went Kansas City's way that probably shouldn't have. You also had Mahomes acting a little bit on the sideline. I think, they tend to play into it a little bit. I think they tend to know it. And you heard a bunch of the Texans in postgame. I think opponents know it as well, which, for a league like this, when think integrity is something that they hold dear to their hearts. Hearing an opponent mention it in post game is not something they should love. But nonetheless, I don't, our games during the season dealt with and changing hands because of some of these calls, like the likely play and the pass interference against Cincinnati. Like, understandable that certainly there's times that it feels like it's happening that way, but I feel like KC's winning games in other ways, and it's just frustrating fans and opponents alike. So that's kind of my initial take here. Going back to like the on the field, to me, the entire story of Houston, Kansas City is kind of just the pressure put on both quarterbacks. So Stroud just does end up with 8 sacks for 58 yards, 5 sacks in the second half. And then you just look at pressure overall. So in both meetings this season, Stroud was 7 of 19 under pressure, under 6 yards per attempt in the first matchup of the year. In the second matchup, he was 6 of 11. Then you look at Mahomes, 9 of 13, 77 yards in the first matchup. He was 6 of 9 for 44 yards and a touchdown second matchup. That's all under pressure. So I just kind of feel like both these quarterbacks were on their butts a lot, especially in the first half, and it just didn't impact Kansas City on key downs as much as it did Houston. The funniest thing looking at all the other games was, of course, KC was the only team to win this weekend that didn't win the turnover battle, as it was 0-0 on both sides. 5-0 Washington, 3-0 Buffalo, 2-0 Philly, and here's KC just figuring out another way to win.
Yeah.
So the thing that, you look at Travis Kelce as well. Over and over and over again, I believe his receiving yards in this game was like in the low 50s. We'll talk about it in a few minutes when we talk about Buffalo, Kansas City, but now it's in the high 60s, low 70s. So that has been, obviously adjusted, when the guy does nothing during the regular season and then is Jerry Rice in the postseason at this point in his career.
He finished with 7 catches, 117 yards, and a touchdown on 8 targets. He had the 49-yarder early, his longest play of the season, a near touchdown. I think that was his longest play of his postseason career, which is a pretty good postseason career. I'm a little salty I didn't get the touchdown. I feel like Travis scores that one like 3 years ago, but, that's what we were betting on him on the first touchdown there. Very interesting. You look at the targets here. I kind of forgot about DeAndre Hopkins in this game, because the Chiefs forgot about DeAndre Hopkins. This is a revenge game for him, right? He played for Houston all those years. He was invisible. And Hollywood Brown with DeAndre Hopkins, those two guys had 3 targets for no catches. They did not get a catch. Hollywood almost did. He dropped one late down the sideline. Xavier Worthy, we bet on his receptions. No escalator, but he got 5 catches. They're clearly trying to get the ball to him short and in space. We saw that play out. And we saw Travis Kelce looking like, as always, legacy playoff Travis Kelce. So we'll come back to that with the hot read, but I think you want to look to those guys again. The Chiefs are what we think they are now. They're living in that short underneath stuff, and it's not real pretty, and it's not exciting, and it's not the best offense in the world. But against the Texans, who played them really well, it was enough, but barely enough too. If you look at success rate, the Chiefs finished 39% success rate for the game. That's only the 27th percentile. Like, this was effectively, if you look at any 4 games, 3 of the 4, the offense is more successful down to down than what the Chiefs are, including on early pass downs in this game. The Chiefs were 5th percentile success rate. That's not good. And now look, Houston's defense was really good here. Buffalo's defense is not as good there, but the Chiefs are not really able to run away from teams and hide because the offense is not explosive. The offense is not blocking well enough. I thought the offensive line might be a real problem here, but maybe not. I don't know who can exploit it. If Houston couldn't get the job done, I don't know who left is going to get the job done. It's feeling increasingly to me like, okay, weirdly, we've seen the Chiefs here before. Every single year, Patrick Mahomes is 7 for 7 now in the conference championship, getting there. We've seen the Bills. We've seen them get to the stage to face the big Goliath in the Chiefs. We've seen the Eagles get to the Super Bowl and face the Chiefs there. We've seen not the Commanders, but these 3 other teams. I think we've seen better versions of all 3 of those teams, but none of that matters because I don't think the Chiefs are as good as they've been in past years, but I also don't know if they have to be because they only have to beat the other teams that are also maybe not as good as they've been in past years, and you can only beat the teams in front of you, and nobody in NFL history has won 3 NFL championships in a row, and the Chiefs are a home game and then a game where they'll be big favorites in the Super Bowl away from doing it now, and I don't think that they're this amazing team right now this season, but I think they're the best team, and somehow we're here again in the Final Four. The Chiefs are the best team. What else is new?
Facing a pretty good defense. I'll call them great for this season in the last game in Houston. not really targeting any wide receivers at all in the game aside from Worthy, and now getting an easier matchup, I think, defensively, at least through the air, and being able to kind of open up the offense. I think this works perfectly. I mean, KC won that game with like 50 rushing yards. Like, teams were 13 and 39 with 50 rushing yards or less in the playoffs in like the last 20 years. Like, people, they win how they want to win. So I think they saw the Houston matchup a little differently, and they're going to see Buffalo differently. And you want to go into that? You want to start with Buffalo and Kansas City here?
Let's start in the NFC because I have one hot read tonight in the AFC. So let's start with the NFC. What do you think about Eagles minus 4.5 Commanders? It's like in the no zone right now, stuck in the middle. I think because we don't really know what to expect with Jalen Hurts. Do you have any lean on that one yet?
Yeah, so let's just talk about the line for a second. So the look ahead when we had this conversation last week was actually 6.5. Yeah. I believe I saw some 4.5s with Philly. Now I see about 5. Now, I think the status of Hurts is relatively in the air, but I think we would make the assumption with this much time and the fact that he returned, we're going to see him. Now, I don't think we'll have an answer for a while in terms of his mobility, or if there's anything there that maybe we didn't see that would impact on the field results. So I think that's probably why we're seeing like a 5 in the market, because I think it could be 4 or 6 depending on his health. That's kind of the way I look at it. I think it's probably important now, before I toss it back to you, just to recap a little bit. So we have seen these teams play twice this season, and they split the games. Now, one of the games, Hurts basically didn't play the entire game because he got hurt, and Pickett took the majority of dropbacks. So I think a lot of what you saw from Philly's side of the ball in that Week 16 game, you can honestly kind of throw out the window. I mean, Jaden played great. I mean, 5 touchdown passes. He was 9 of 81 on the ground. Saquon in both games went absolutely nuts in both games. I mean, he had 150 yards in one game on 29 carries, 60 yards after contact. In the other game, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns, 50 yards after contact. So to me, I look at both of those games and say, okay, well, Philly could throw for 30 yards in this game and probably still win. But we could talk about this a little more, but break it down a little bit. Philly, Washington, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, even the game Washington won, Saquon had over 100 yards in the first quarter. The Eagles, who couldn't score in the first quarter all season, scored 21. And then effectively, if you kind of zoom out big picture, we've kept talking about Eagles, number 1 defense since their bye week. Basically, the Eagles have been a flawless defense the entire season since then, except for one quarter. And the one quarter was against Washington in the game they lost because Philly was up 27-14, even without Hurts most of the game, into the fourth quarter. And I think their defense, I don't even know if they were terrible as much as I think they just ran out of gas. They were just on the field the whole second half because defense is not an isolated thing. If your offense can't do anything, like, here's the problem. If Hurts can't pass the ball, and then inevitably you go 3 and out on a running drive where you can't move the ball and you get no first down, now the defense is right back on the field again. So I think looking at the game, did Philadelphia, did Washington solve them a little bit and find some answers? Maybe, or maybe the defense just got tired. I think we kind of like know-ish what to expect on that side. Like, we know Jane Daniels is really good and probably not going to get a lot of help from like Brian Robinson or the run game here. We know Philly's defense is pretty good. I don't know if I have any idea what's happening on the other side. I don't know if Washington's defense is actually improved like they seem to be by some of the advanced metrics, because guess what? They've not been improved in the playoffs. They can't stop anybody. Tampa's numbers were really good against them. They just didn't get on the field very much. Detroit, Jahmyr Gibbs is running for like 10, 15 yards a touch every time he gets the ball. They just had 5 turnovers. Washington made those plays. They get credit. But like all the other plays, they get credit for also. And there were a lot of bad ones. So I don't know if I trust the defense, but I don't know if I trust Philadelphia's offense. I trusted them on the look ahead. I would have loved Eagles anything below 7 if Hurts was healthy. I would have thought Saquon, Hurts, run the ball, defense, done. Defense and running, get the win. Basically same cap I had against the Rams today. And now I don't know I can trust that, because I still trust the defense, but I don't know if just running can work if you don't have a quarterback that can really run either. That's part of the run game also. So I'm kind of stuck here. I don't have a play yet on this one. I don't have a hot read on it. I was kind of lean under. Washington's been an over team this season, Philly more under. The Hurts injury kind of pushes me that way. So that makes me scared also to lay the points. I lean Philly still. My numbers would have Philly just by maybe a point or so. But Jane Daniels, rookie on the road conference championship. There's a reason we don't have a rookie starting in the Super Bowl yet, but it's going to happen at some point. I did look up in Bet Labs conference championships in the last 2 decades. Only time that we have division rematches, we had 4 of them. The favorite is 4-0 by 6 points a game. So pretty close games. We never really had any big blowouts. They're 3-1 ATS, but only by 2 points a game. So I think that's about what we have here. I think Philadelphia barely gets over the line with a win. I don't know if I'm confident in a cover yet. And I think, like you said at the top here, I think the line's going to move one direction or the other. And I don't have a sense of where it's going to move. And if I feel good enough about Philly to want to bet them, I probably will feel like it should have moved further above a touchdown anyway, where I had the number initially. So I don't think the line's going to go that far. And it is much to my advantage if I wait and it gets down to 4 or below the 4. Now we're talking. Now I've got some real value on the number. So I don't know. I think this is going to be a really tough game to bet because I don't think we're going to really know until we see them on the field exactly what Jalen Hurts looks like. And we're going to kind of be playing the guessing game all week.
Yeah, I think the one thing in terms of, and at this time of year, I rarely try to talk about travel much because we've just all been through so much. But it is pretty crazy that Philly hasn't played on the road since December 22nd against these Commanders. This will be their 5th straight home game. And Washington on the other side, this will be their 4th straight road game. So you do kind of have a situation where Washington has been bouncing around. They've been winning as underdogs kind of wherever they go. But Philly's been hanging out. They've been at home forever. Using Bet Labs, and I got to go deeper this week. I'm not sure we've seen an example where you've got a team 5 straight home games, road team 4 straight road games in the playoffs. So that's a really crazy spot coming into this one. In terms of injuries, the 2 were Quinyon Mitchell, which I mean, forget Hurts. Hurts is the injury, obviously.
Right.
Everyone's going to talk about. The other 2 would be Quinyon Mitchell, and you mentioned Sam Cosmi. I feel like that one is one that absolutely, he's, I believe, done. And he's going to be done for a little bit of next year. Yeah. He has the 4th most pass block snaps for any guard. And you have 51 guards with 500 plus pass block snaps. He's one of 11 with 1 sack allowed or less. I mean, he's been very good for them. And I think noticing some of the data as I was quickly trying to get through some of the Washington games, and I think Jaden does like to go sometimes through those guard slots. So I would be a little worried here and definitely something to look into a little further. So that's definitely my note on this one because, and then from the other side, the pressure on Hurts has been a little odd. He had 5 incompletions in this game and 7 sacks. In 2 playoff games, interior offensive linemen have allowed 15 pressures and 4 sacks on 58 dropbacks, 26% pressure rate. Not good at all. Hurts sacked, I believe, 9 times in 2 games. So, I mean, is that going to come to play outdoors against this Washington team? I'm not exactly sure. Washington isn't exactly the highest pressure rate on their defense, but I do feel like 9 sacks in 2 games is something to talk about.
Yeah, I think so too. And Hurts has definitely been, for his career, a guy that holds the ball too long and invites that pressure. And really, Jane Daniels as well, very differently, but Jane Daniels holds the ball a long time just trying to make things happen and then scrambles very quickly. But both of those guys, I think that is a story. And we saw Daniels eating a lot of sacks toward the end of the season. That offensive line really outperformed their expectations early. They were like bottom 5 in my preseason rankings, really looked good, then picked up some injuries. And remember that kind of dip in a month where Washington looked like, oh, we hit the cliff. Turned out that probably was just injuries. The offensive line was rough, and Jaden had that rib injury. Well, now the offensive line is trending bad in that direction again. That definitely looks like a problem as well. So I think, again, all of that leads me more toward the under on this one, especially with a total that's relatively high right now. If we're not trusting Washington's line and we're not trusting Jalen Hurts, the score on the other side, I know Washington just played in like a 9,000 point game. It's hard to take an under on that one, but I feel like if I had to make any pick right now, that's probably the direction I would be leaning.
Okay. All right. Well, I think, are we comfortable moving on to Buffalo KC here?
Let's do it.
Okay. Why don't you start with your hot read, talk about your pick a little bit, and then I will go through a few stats on the matchup.
So I'm on Chiefs -1.5, and I knew right away once I started digging into this, okay, I didn't even know I'd get here, but I guess I'm on the Chiefs here because this is going to sound crazy, but my numbers, my models make this something more like Chiefs -3.5, even as high as 4.5 or 5 points. I have the Bills a clear tier below what I thought was a top 4 in the NFL, and we've been treating it like the Bills are in that top tier. But my model and my numbers have not treated that way. Like the DVOA models, a lot of models out there have not felt like the Bills were really in that top tier of teams. So I look kind of go down the roster here. I know that the Chiefs' offensive line has not been great this season. The interior great, the tackle's not great. I know their receivers have not been great this season. It's problematic that I still like their receivers better than Buffalo's, and I still like their blocking better than Buffalo's because I like the Chiefs' defense better than Buffalo's, for sure. I like their coaching better than Buffalo. I really like their special teams. That's a huge advantage for Kansas City in this one. And I still like the quarterback better. It's close, but I still like Pat rather than Josh. So, what do I like better for Buffalo? They can run the ball better. For sure, that's an advantage here. But is that enough? I don't think it's enough because if running the ball is not enough to make up for all those other advantages there, then all that's left is kind of the case I had for Buffalo today, which was Josh Allen outplaying Patrick Mahomes. And Josh Allen can do that, but I don't know that I want to bet on that happening on the road in a spot where we've seen him go head-to-head with Mahomes, but not be able to do it. To me, Buffalo's defense is the main reason for the pick here. I think these defenses are moving in opposite directions right now. Chiefs defense had a dip in the middle of the season, but that stretch before the Week 18 nothing game, they were top 5 again. A little worse against the run. I do think Buffalo can run, but the Bills have faded. They're kind of more toward back of the top 10 down the stretch. And I didn't think that they were very good even today against the Ravens. They got the turnovers, but you allowed 25 points to the Ravens in a bad weather game, even turning it over 3 times. That's not a great performance. Bills have faced a top 12 offense. They allowed 29.3 points a game in those games this season. So that's not a great number. Now the Chiefs, by DVOA, still qualify as a top 12 offense. It's not great to have to tell you that part. That kind of tells us what we think about them this season. But I like the matchup for Kansas City. They prefer to run up the middle. We talked about that with Buffalo, where they're better defending outside on the run. They're less good inside. We saw Baltimore get the ball moving up the middle. I think the Chiefs can get a little bit of running more than they usually do. And mostly, what have we said about Buffalo? Both games I've been betting running backs to do well against Buffalo. Why? Because they don't defend short passes well and they don't defend the middle of the field well. That is where Patrick Mahomes lives now. It sucks. I don't want him to live there. I want him to live down the field. He had the number 2 most short passes in the league. This is Xavier Worthy season and Travis Kelce season. So DraftKings already has lines up. I got a couple props for you already because I think both these lines go up. Xavier Worthy over 4.5 catches, -135. Quick slip for both of these will be in the link for you there. So these are bonus prop hot reads. Our first prop hot reads ever, I think. Travis Kelce, I'm going receiving yards on him, over 65.5. I think that one's already going up as well. He's had 71 yards or more in 14 straight playoff games now. So that line is rising. We're probably not going to get another 49-yarder in there, but I think this is a game where the Chiefs run the ball, quote unquote, by getting it to Worthy and to Kelce and playing the underneath game and just controlling the clock that way. Especially, I think Buffalo, that last drive against Baltimore today, Taron Johnson went out. That's a big injury for them. I think that one looms large injury-wise for Buffalo as well. So I like Kansas City here. Conference championship matchup. When you're the 1 seed, last couple decades, 20-5 straight up as the favorite. 8-0 straight up with at least 11% better win rate. That's the Chiefs here. They're 15-2 versus 13-4 for Buffalo. 8-0 straight up, winning by 16.5 points a game. I'm not predicting that. I don't think you'll catch me on a Chiefs escalator at 16.5 on this one, but I think under 3, I have to feel good about the Chiefs at home with Mahomes. And I think with the better roster around, because I think Buffalo's roster has not been great. It's a similar bet to the bet I just lost betting on Baltimore. But I think that the numbers we saw from Baltimore was that they were the better team, the better roster. They just made some mistakes. I don't think the Chiefs are going to make those mistakes. So the Bills are going to have to actually beat them their own way without finding the mistakes that way. And the Chiefs don't do that. So Chiefs minus 1.5. That's the official hot read pick. Now I will say this: you can play that one in the play that one on the quick slip. The link is there for you. I don't know if you need to rush to play this one like a traditional hot read. I don't think we're getting to a -3 here, because Buffalo's going to get way too much action that way. It wouldn't stun me to see this move towards Buffalo a little bit. It wouldn't shock me if we might even get like near an even odds money line in that direction. Kansas City is -120 right now. I don't think you need to run to bet the Chiefs right now. We're not going to certainly get past the 3, but I could tell at the end of the day, Chiefs is the side I'm going to be on in this one. And here we are again, after all my poo-pooing them all season long, picking the Chiefs on the hot read to get back to the Super Bowl. I guess that's Patrick Mahomes for you.
I mean, when I was looking at the data, I tried to look at the previous matchups, KC, Buffalo. It is worth noting. So Buffalo obviously beats Kansas City previous meeting. I haven't looked this up yet. I assume Patrick Mahomes pretty decent on revenge spots. It is pretty fun that week 11, we had Washington, Philly, and Buffalo, Kansas City both in the same week. And now that is the conference championship. I thought that was kind of fun. I will also say this from the week 11 game, Buffalo, Kansas City, Khalil Shakir, 12 targets, 70 yards, 8 receptions. I think he will be important in this game. If we like Kansas City, you like Buffalo trailing, I think he is a good target to try to help Buffalo get upfield in the middle of the field as well. The other one is this. I looked at Mahomes' last 5 games versus Buffalo, all since the 2022 playoffs, 5 games. He has set 6 passing touchdowns and no picks in those games in a clean pocket. Under pressure, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions.
Ooh.
When he is in play action or in a screen during those 5 games, 4 touchdowns, no picks. What this tells me is this. If they don't get to him and let him do exactly what he wants to do, whether that's a clean pocket, play action, or screens, basically 10 touchdowns and no picks. I mean, you're going to be in a lot of trouble if KC gets to do their game plan. If you get in the middle of that game plan and you do a little bit of what he did to Lamar today, Mahomes has 5 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. You're going to figure out a way, because their offense has lots of weapons, but they're not explosive. And it's a little weird thing to say because, like you said, it's not truly dink and dunk, but it's not like they're going 20 yards downfield. So if you get into that pocket and make him kind of hop around a little bit, I think you're going to find success. So that's my angle on this one. 2 trends, home unders for Mahomes, 42, 27, and 1, 61%, 48.5, decently high, but kind of in the middle there. And then you mentioned Kelsey. Here's what he's done at home against Buffalo. 6 receptions, 83 yards, 8 for 108, 8 for 96, 6 for 57, 13 of 118. So I just feel like in this game, doesn't matter the game script, whether it's positive or negative, he's going to be a part of it. It's the reason I kind of like Noah Gray as well. I looked on DraftKings. I didn't see Gray available, but I do think if it's 1.5 receptions, if it's like 10, 11, 12 yards, like he was getting looks in this game as well because Mahomes is living in the middle of the field. So I do feel like there is an opportunity there. So that is my analysis on this one. I don't know if you have anything else, but
I had a similar one too. I was looking immediately, of course, looked for a running back I could lose money on betting against running back reception yards. No Justice Hill, no Javonte Williams. It's not working out for me. But if I can get a Samaje Perine over 1/2 of a catch, like I was like, okay, who is it? Is it Pacheco or is it Hunt? It turns out it's neither. Neither one of them catches passes, but Samaje still seems how to get on the field a little bit and catch a pass every now and then. So I might have an eye on that one. Just off the top of my head, because we know this matchup so well, I was just thinking about, okay, what else will I be checking in this game? So things that I may come back to when we get to our best bets. I love to bet both teams to score in the 4th quarter in this matchup. That's something that has come often just because we know we get the fireworks late. we often see kind of a slow build up and then fireworks at the end of the game. So keep an eye on that one. I love to bet both Mahomes and Josh Allen rushing overs in this matchup, just because this is it, man. You empty the cannon. This is what the whole thing is for. So we see them really see them run a lot. And usually in this matchup, both of those rushing lines open and then immediately start to move up. And if you're talking like 22 versus 29 on the line, that's a huge difference. So definitely keep an eye on both of those. The other thing too, just thinking big picture, I find it hard to believe with Jalen Hurts injured, especially, that I'm not going to feel good about whoever wins this game being a relatively clear favorite in the Super Bowl. So I think if you feel like you have a side here, maybe with the money line looking so even, you don't play the money line. Maybe you invest in a Super Bowl ticket and you get out ahead and say, okay, if I'm right about my pick here, now I have a ticket in the Super Bowl where I have much better odds and I've got some options to go from there. So I think future is big picture. That might be the way to play either the Chiefs or the Bills. Whoever goes out ahead, you're going to have Allen or Mahomes in the Super Bowl. And I think you're going to feel pretty good about having one of those guys and getting the AFC ticket that way too. So I think those are other angles to keep paying attention to. And we'll see which of them pop up in the best bets when we come back later in the week.
Sorry, I'm going to read this off my phone, but I feel like the rushing yard props that are already up for this game are kind of fascinating, since the lead back, I would say, of the two teams is James Cook,
Sure.
which is 56.5 rushing yards. But like Allen's 47.5, Kareem Hunt 35.5, Pacheco 34.5, Mahomes 26.5. They're all kind of in that, like, we don't exactly know who's going to get the ball or for how many carries, but we'll let you guess. I know a lot of people liked Pacheco in this game today, and he did, or yesterday, and he did virtually nothing in the game.
Yeah.
He now opens at 34.5, and you say to yourself, 34.5. Like, if Casey has the lead, like, how many other options do they have? That one just feels so low to me if you like Kansas City. But distribution of carries, I think, is something that is a little bit difficult with Hunt, especially. They kind of like his battering ram style that I feel like they don't exactly have right now with Pacheco, which I think I just have to look into that more. But kind of fascinating. They both basically have the same number on the prop right now. But that's it. That's all I've got. You have anything else?
I think that's it. We're going to do it all again when we get to best bets, and we're down to 3 games left. We're here.
Yeah, 3 games left in the season. We've got best bets episodes. I'll be on the favorites. Brandon will be on shows. We've got Convince Me next weekend. We've got all of the content up on actionnetwork.com and the Action Network app. We're going to bring you everything we've got. I'll have my article coming out Tuesday or Wednesday. Brandon will have all of his stuff as well. That is it. So we will see you next weekend. I am Evan Abrams. That is Brandon Anderson. Enjoy your week and enjoy the national title game Monday night as well. See you later, everybody.